August 19th, 2021 Watertown City Plan Commission meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Sure. Culhane.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Dargich Johnson. Here. Dolly.
Here.
Spire.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
And Diana Ford is absent. And Jeff Brink is also absent.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Item 3 on the agenda is invitation for public comment participants submittal. We'll have a spot on the agenda after the regular scheduled agenda for public comments if there's somebody here to speak on an item that's not on the agenda tonight but would like to address the board. If you'd like to do so, please make note of that and sign up there in the room. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
So moved, Colleen.
Second, Oletsky.
Motion by Culhane, a second by Oletsky. Any discussion on that agenda? All right, we'll take a vote on that.
Culhane.
Aye.
Kays.
Yes.
Dargich Johnson.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yep.
Spire.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
And Hanson.
Yes.
All right. Agenda is approved.
Moving on to item 5 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the August 5th, 2021 meeting.
So moved, Colleen. Move for approval.
Second, Dargich.
A motion and a second. Any additional discussion on those before we take a vote? All right, we'll proceed with the vote.
Okay. Hanson.
Yes.
Spire.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Dargich Johnson.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda, item 6A on the agenda is the commission consideration of resolution 2021-39. So this would be the other half of the medical cannabis regulations that we were just speaking of about the joint jurisdictional area. So Stacy, if you want to take us through that one.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Dolly. So this is the actual first ordinance. We'll be considering 2 ordinances today. This one is actually a zoning text amendment to our current zoning ordinance, which is Title 21. Within this ordinance, I just want to call your attention. I'm going to try to share my screen here for a moment. Oh, I don't. Okay. Oh, okay. Can everybody see that? Can you
can.
see the resolution number 39 in front of you? All right. Well, very good. So basically what this resolution would do is it adds in a number of cannabis uses into certain zoning districts that we already have within the city. So there's the 4 types of medical cannabis uses that the state has defined. If you remember that from our previous discussion. So we have a medical cannabis dispensary. We also have a few other uses, including a cultivation facility for medical cannabis, a medical cannabis testing facility, and a medical cannabis product manufacturing facility. So this particular ordinance is designed to work in tandem with the next ordinance that we'll be looking at, which is Title 25, and that's a brand new standalone ordinance. But for purposes of establishing these types of uses, there was a medical cannabis committee, and we met a total of about 4 or 5 times recently, and we really looked at these things. There was a vast group of various members, staff members, and other experts and members from the community that were present at these meetings. And so that committee did recommend adding a medical cannabis dispensary into 3 existing zoning districts, including the C1, which is our community commercial, better known as the downtown area, our C2 district, which is the local commercial district, and also the C3 district, which is our highway commercial district. So a medical cannabis would be added as a permitted special use, meaning that it would be a permitted use so long as all of the provisions were met in Title 25, which is the next ordinance that we'll be looking at this evening. So basically commercial areas for a dispensary. The rationale behind that was really having a retail store would be appropriate in those locations. Also, similar uses, looking at a pharmacy. Those are the districts you'd be most apt to see a pharmacy in. Scrolling down a little bit here on this screen, now we're going to take a look at the cultivation facility. So that's the growing facility, testing facility, which is primarily going to be a lab, I understand. And then product manufacturing facility. So that's all kinds of uses where I understand could be a bit heavier use there in terms of compression and getting oils out of the cannabis products. So for these types of uses, the committee recommended placing them as permitted special uses again, meaning that they can go into the I-1 district, which is our light industrial district, or the I-2 district, which is the heavy industrial district, so long as they meet the special provisions, again, outlined in Title 25, and we'll be looking at that next. The reason for putting them in these districts, basically the intensity of the use. So we want to look at the intensities and would it be compatible with residential per se. And in this case, due to some of the heaviness of the use or the intensity of the use and perhaps odors and other things of that nature, we felt these uses were best suited in industrial districts. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, Case, more of a comment than a question. I just want to thank Stacy and the rest of the staff for spending a lot of time and coordinating the efforts regarding both of these ordinances that are being proposed to the City Council. I think it's the appropriate thing to have these uses separated by specific zoning districts, just the potential noxious odors that are generated, the potential safety issues based on how medical marijuana or cannabis is extracted, the butane that's involved, some of the drying features. It probably does need to be separated from other uses, and we'll get into that in the next ordinance, but I think these are the appropriate districts for those specific uses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Mr. Case. So as you said, the first public hearing and action that we'll take on this resolution is related to the zoning specifically. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing in relation to the zoning proposed in 2021-39. If anybody's here to speak on behalf or against in the public hearing, now would be the time to do so. Is there anybody in the room there to speak in the public?
No, we're not seeing anyone.
Anybody on Teams? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public hearing on this.
I'll move to approve resolution number 21-39. Culhane.
Second, Case.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion from the board before we take a vote on this? All right, we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
All right, thank you. Kays.
Aye.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes.
Spire.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
And Dolly.
Yes,
Motion carries.
resolution passes. All right, moving on to item 6B on the agenda is commission consideration for resolution number 37, adding Title 25 to the revised ordinance book of the City of Watertown pertaining to medical cannabis regulations and use within the City of Watertown. Stacy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It'll take me just a moment here. I'm going to pull this one up. You may have noticed a bunch of attachments online, and those are simply for reference. attachments. Those attachments basically were the state's draft administrative rules, which a lot of those rules have been carried over into this standalone ordinance. And then the other attachment that you would find online, which we did not print for your packet because it's rather lengthy, is South Dakota Codified Law 34-20G. So we may refer to those from time to time, but for purposes of this, we are looking at the city's ordinance right here. So as I had said, this is a standalone ordinance. It's brand new. It'd be a new title, as we have now just had medical cannabis uses legalized within the state of South Dakota. So having said that, just to kind of summarize this ordinance is designed to work in tandem with Title 21, which you just saw and approved. And this does have some special uses within it. This ordinance, it's kind of based on three components. The first component is licensing, which on the licensing aspect, that is more a role of the city council. So they're certainly welcome to ask questions, but I'd like to focus our discussion today primarily on setbacks from protected uses and the zoning regulations and standards. So that would be very helpful there. So with that, we did have in here a limit of 3 medical dispensaries. So I can shed a little light on that if anyone wonders later. So that is one of the components within here. There's also a licensing fee, of course, and a renewal process. We do have zoning regulations and standards. We have some setbacks from protected uses. We have fire and building code standards for safety. As Mr. Kays alluded to earlier, some of these uses do have some safety concerns associated with them. We did have a section on signage limitations and prohibiting of smoking medical cannabis in public places, and it also includes the enforcement provisions. So with that, I'll just kind of walk you through this ordinance a bit and where it starts into the special provisions. But before I do that, actually, I'd like to take you on a little bit of a tour of how we arrived at the number of 3. Because that is a question that I've had on this. So basically, in looking at all the data, I dusted it off because I had looked at this some time ago. And basically what we have here in South Dakota is 1 pharmacy per 3,033 people. And so with that, we figure about a third of those people, a third of the 3,033 people, would maybe be eligible for a cannabis card, a medical cannabis card, that is. So that would be, we figured, about approximately 1 per 10,000 people. And we are including Cottington County within that number for convenience. We could look at it as that might be about 28,000 total, but there'd be room to grow. So that's where we're getting pretty close to the 3. So there is a methodology to how this was derived. We want to make sure that there is sufficient dispensaries for patients to be able to purchase product.
Mr. Chair,
Is Mr. Kays?
may I ask Stacy a question?
Yes.
And what Stacy, wasn't part of the reasoning behind this too, is that since these licenses are not transferable to people, they don't gain in value like you would with a liquor license. I know there's been people talking about the market should decide and those types of things because it'll make some of these licenses way out of whack. And in the actuality, it's 5,000, 5,000, 5,000 year to year to year. I want to sell my license to Liam. I can't.
That is correct. Yes. Yes. Great point, Mr. Kays. Definitely.
Stacey, you mentioned pharmacies. though. We don't have any limitation on the number of pharmacies.
We do not have any limitation on the number of pharmacies. This is simply just a comparison statistic that's out there. The other part on that I forgot to add here earlier is the state of North Dakota has less than 9,000 medical cannabis cards statewide. So this is actually fairly generous on the number that we really think would be able to provide service and product to those with a card.
And Mr. Chair, again, sitting on the task force, we thought it was always easier to go up as opposed to go down, and that's why we decided you have to have at least one. And so I think the board, the task force thought that 3 seems like a reasonable number. Law enforcement was also very much directing us that they would just as soon have a few to start with until we can figure out how that's going to be policed and those types of things.
The thing I grapple with personally is when we put an arbitrary limitation on something like that, even if it's not transferable person to person, in some cases it can be tantamount to a government enforced or government authorized monopoly that limits, the free market's ability to direct competition. Now, having said that, I don't think it's necessarily germane to the decision in front of us today, as it doesn't directly relate to the zoning and the placement of these districts. That's more in line with the setbacks that we're going to be discussing.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, I have a question for Stacy, please.
Sure.
Yep.
25.10, smoking of cannabis. Is medical marijuana only received smoking it?
No, I believe there's a number of ways to ingest it.
So we're not worried about ingesting it in public then? I mean, obviously, you can't
Yeah.
micromanage, but if it's, we didn't address that, that's all I'm.
I think, again, that's probably not germane to the zoning discussion. From a licensing standpoint in the total Title 25, I think the issue was that if I'm going to have a gummy bear, no one's going to get secondhand gummy bear. But if I'm smoking it publicly, I could have secondhand smoke issues. Very much, we can't smoke cigarettes in bars anymore, and those types of things. I think that was the basis or the rationale.
Yes, I agree on that. That would be something we could note and have City Attorney Roby review that. But I agree in the fact of we're not necessarily regulating if someone is taking a prescription medication out in public, so long as it isn't becoming a nuisance or a bother to others. But good point.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. If you want to continue on with the
Sure.
notes that you had.
Yes, and just one more comment on the number, just going back to that briefly. A lot of that was from a law enforcement perspective, and certainly it is a feeling out for all of us, but there is a thought that having more dispensaries may increase the amount of calls and crime and that type of thing. So.
This is Bonnie. I have a question for Stacy. Can I?
Yes, Bonnie.
Okay. What my question is like, okay, we got a limit on the number of dispensaries. What about cultivation places?
No, there would
No?
be no limit on
Okay.
cultivation, testing, or manufacturing. Okay, I'm going to get to the appropriate section here and continue on. So I'm looking at the 25.06 locations and special use provisions for medical cannabis establishments. And the first one we have is the medical cannabis dispensary. And so what this basically says, again, it mirrors what you had just looked at with the zoning amendment. It's allowing medical cannabis dispensaries in the C1, the C2, and the C3 district as referenced back in Title 21. And we do have a prescribed distance requirement or a setback, if you will, from some protected uses. The first criteria here comes right out of the draft administrative rules with the state of South Dakota. And basically, it says a dispensary shall not be located within 1,000 feet of a public or private school, including a licensed preschool, existing before the date of the medical cannabis establishment application. And you can even see the reference down here. The second one would be a 500-foot setback from a non-residential daycare or licensed daycare facility. The third one, which does mirror the language you already have in city code regarding the sale of liquor from public parks. And that'd be a 300-foot setback for public parks, public pools, or public recreational facility or library. Again, that 300 foot's about the length of a city block, and that would be the setback for a dispensary. We also have a 300-foot setback from a religious institution, a 500 setback from a residential district. And no future development will cause a dispensary to become non-conforming due to the establishment of a protected use within that prescribed distance herein. If you look at these uses that are protected within this ordinance, they all predominantly have children in these locations in higher numbers. And so that's the common theme throughout this ordinance and many other ordinances throughout the country. If we look at item B, this one also comes directly out of the state. And it basically says, no medical cannabis dispensaries shall share access with another medical cannabis establishment or a business that sells alcohol and tobacco. So you couldn't necessarily have, a liquor store in front and a medical dispensary in the back, that type of thing, and no direct access. The others are just some kind of more general provisions. Permanent or temporary dispensaries are prohibited in all other zoning districts, and they're not eligible for a home occupation. And we also have unlawful. It'd be unlawful to operate a dispensary in a building that is mixed use. The thought behind that was if we have a setback from a residential district, then potentially we should apply some of the same logic and not allow for a dispensary in the same building that folks are living in. So that was the rationale there. And then, of course, there's a few more things here. A lot of these, again, come right out of the state draft requirements about you need to be 21 years of age in order to enter a dispensary. There'd be access control measures that are very specific pursuant to state requirements, things such as security cameras and securing specific areas and things of that nature. Mobile dispensaries would not be allowed, and they would need to be in an enclosed structure on a permanent foundation. Drive-through or curbside pickup or drop-off, we would have those prohibited, and the hours of operation would be from 12 a.m. to 7 a.m. any day of the week. A little bit on refuse containers. We wouldn't want to be seeing a lot of stuff stored outside. That would be inside, and that would be picked up by a private trash hauler. We also have, this is again coming from the state, that retail products, storage, sales, display areas should be kept out of public view and not visible from the exterior of the building. We do have a little bit on signage as well, and we have no billboard advertising or pole signage allowed, and then no graphic displays, videos, as those displayed on electronic messaging centers. Sign logos and symbols are permissible. Some of that is within the state draft, but not all of that. And then we'd be regulating those dispensaries in accordance with the signage that we already have on the books. So any questions on that section?
Stacy, maybe it would be appropriate just quickly to pull up the map of where that
Yes.
would be
Yes.
allowed in the city.
Sure.
Based upon those setbacks.
Thank you, Mr. Kays. Great idea. Good segue.
So Stacy, while you're pulling that up, this is Bill. Just one quick question.
Sure.
Any consideration given to, the the carrying out or the taking out of the product from the dispensary. I think in other states, they have specified, that it cannot be in a, it's got to be an unmarked container, it can't be visible, et cetera, things like that nature.
I believe that the state does cover things in greater specificity to that degree, and I'm going to
Okay.
maybe defer to Mr. Kays if he knows any more specifics, but I do remember reading a whole host of requirements that are in those draft administrative rules.
Sure.
But thank you.
I, off the top of my head, I can't remember. It's a blur. Sorry.
So I have a question, and again, I'm new to this, I guess. No one under 21 gets medical marijuana prescribed to them?
No, if you're under 21, you may get prescribed. It's not really a prescription either. That's a little bit of a false narrative. What happens is I get a letter from a doctor because a prescription would connote some sort of a dosage. You're not getting a dosage. You're getting a letter saying that you have a debilitating illness and that medical marijuana may treat that illness. That's what ends up happening. So if I have a 7-year-old that suffers from seizures, my 7-year-old could get a letter saying that medical marijuana will help that child's situation, and then I can be the caregiver. And so because I'm over 21, I could then get the cannabis for them, and that's kind of how the system works. But otherwise, if you're over, then you have to be 21 to purchase, and you have to have your card.
Okay, so we have an 18-year-old student here, and maybe this is, hypothetical, but if they have the medical card, they can't even go in and get it here.
No, you can't get a medical card unless you're 21.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think you would be working through your physician and your caregiver for that, and that is a state provision as well.
Yeah, that comes straight out of the state administrative rules.
It probably did, but I guess I was curious how that worked. Thanks.
You're welcome. Good question.
And Stacy, in relation to the setbacks, you went over those in 2506-1A. You mentioned item I, the 1,000 foot from the public and private schools,
Yes.
as being part of codified law. Is that the
Yes.
only one
Yes.
Yes.
of those setbacks that's codified law?
That's
the
the
rest of
only
them
one.
are specific to Watertown's
Right.
proposal.
That's correct. Yes.
We have seen other communities across the state impose setbacks that was their own community standards. Within the administrative rules and the state law, it says that communities may regulate the time, place, and manner. Separation distances would be a place requirement. And so that gives communities the ability to establish what reasonable setbacks need to be. We can't establish setbacks that would preclude the development, especially of dispensaries, but the other uses, because then that becomes exclusionary by nature. So as I segue then, so what happened was maps were made based upon these proposed setbacks to show those areas in the pale blue along Highway 20, 212, 81, and then the downtown area where properties would meet all those prescribed setbacks, at least at the 5,000 foot level. There would still have to be some street verification, but it does show that there is plenty of property in the city to locate at least up to 3 dispensaries at this point in time.
Yes, and you can see, as Commissioner Kays alluded to, these areas in the light blue would be available pending looking more specifically at an actual application. But generally what this map is showing is it's pushing a lot of the dispensary locations down to 212, a bit in the downtown, a little sliver over here. And then also there's some here around the interstate as well. So that's kind of what that looks like.
Thank
Okay.
you, Stacy.
You're welcome. Any questions on the protected uses, the setbacks, where they would be allowed, anything dealing with dispensaries? Okay,
All right, at this time, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing then on this item. If anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. Anybody in the room or anybody on Teams? Last call. We'll close the public hearing.
Okay, there's just a few more items to go. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chair, I'll try to go over these more quickly.
Sure.
The second use we have is a cannabis cultivation facility. Again, we've already talked about that being a permitted special use in the I-1 and I-2 district. So just a few things to note on this one. We would like to see all cultivation operations in a completely enclosed structure on a permanent foundation. Again, security measures by the state regulations. We'd like to see a perimeter fence and a security gate. And then we would like to also have a setback of 500 feet from a residential district. So those are kind of some of the main things here on cultivation. Ventilation and filtration system, that would be required, meeting the state regulations. So there would be that aspect. And then there's also another aspect that relates to that too. And this would be adopting the fire code. A building permit would be required. That's pretty standard language there. And then adoption of the National Fire Code Association, NFPA 1, Chapter 38, that does include cannabis growing, processing, or extraction facilities. So that is also another component here. Any questions on the cultivation facility?
And you had those on the map as well.
We'll show the map, and it'll show the cultivation, the testing, and then it will also show the manufacturing as well. So it'll show all three uses on another map here. The testing facility, again, it's a lab I-1, I-2 district. Won't spend a lot of time on this one. The setback here would be the 300 feet from a residential district. The reason for the reduced setback would be it's predominantly a lab. We're not anticipating the intensity. It'd be a lower intensity on the scale of intensity of uses, and predominantly probably less negative impacts to a neighborhood. So, and then the fourth one we have is a cannabis product manufacturing facility. Again, the I-1 and the I-2 district has a lot of the same provisions, but this one would be 1,000 feet from a residential district. And the reason for that would be they can be very explosive. We could have odors, and we could have people complaining under the nuisance code and things of that nature. So we thought that the 1,000-foot separation would likely help mitigate any negative impacts to residential districts.
Stacy,
we have a restriction on the proximity for the fireworks manufacturing in ordinance as well. Is that half mile? Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
I believe you're right.
I think it's a half
right.
mile. For similar use case, right? So there's an explosion proximity risk, right, for residential districts, and so we did set that from a safety perspective.
Yes, for safety, definitely safety, and just making sure that we're respecting the residential character of the neighborhood and not intruding upon it with heavier uses.
okay, Stacy, I have a question for you. In the same building, could we have growing, testing, and manufacturing in the same building?
I don't believe so. And I feel like that was one of the provisions within the state that basically separates all of those uses.
As of right now, I mean, I think that's something that they're looking at, no vertical integration going on. However, that might change, and I think that's something, just I'm going to put a little caveat, all the heavy lifting that's been going on. There's possibility of a fall session to deal solely with this. The state could turn around and decide that we're going to pass a law that's going to allow for adult use and then get rid of medical marijuana, and all these things, for all practical purposes, go away. And then we have to look at it from a different perspective. So I think one thing we have to be cognizant of is that we're not done talking about marijuana or cannabis and regulating it. And this is just the first step of a long journey.
Agreed. We definitely think that there will be changes to come, whether that be through legislation and or adult use and just changing conditions. So we do anticipate that these will be changing at some point. Or could change with your recommendations for change as well as the city council. So with that, I think we've kind of gone through most of it, unless there's any specific questions. I'm going to bring up those maps and we'll look at those locations a little bit here. Okay, so this one actually shows a whole bunch of colors and it looks kind of complex, so I'll walk you through it. What we have in the transparent purple and the transparent red is basically areas that would be unencumbered by setbacks. So that would mean that you could do one of those three uses, or all of those three uses, I should say, within any of these areas that are transparent here. Not the blue, just the red and the purple, because those are the industrial zones. The blue, again, would be for medical dispensaries. So that's kind of what that looks like for cultivation, a testing, and a manufacturing standpoint. We also have a lot of different colors here, and I'll try to explain this and rely on Mr. Kays if you have any more detailed questions. So basically, if we take this area here, you'll see the green. Within the green here, a testing facility would be allowed, as well as a cultivation facility. Because remember, we have that 1,000-foot setback from residential. So within this, we would not be able to have any manufacturing in this green color. Then we have a teal color here, and this would still allow for testing within here, but it would not allow for cultivation or manufacturing. So just testing. And the yellow here wouldn't allow for either one, because this is essentially the setback that's close to residential. So any questions on this map?
Yes, I have one.
Sure.
Down by 81, you know, where we have allowed, it's a heavy industrial, but we have allowed apartments and houses in there. Does that affect that at all?
So we are just looking from residential districts. I think you might be referring to like a contractor shop that has a care unit.
Which would then
Yes.
be precluded
Yes.
from that building, would not be allowed, because if I have somebody
Yes.
living there, I
Yes.
can't.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
building would be precluded, but not, there wouldn't be a specific
But
setback.
they don't
from-
have the setback from them, just the building.
Correct. A caretaker's residence. That's what I was trying to say. I'm sorry about that. So yes, we do have a number of caretaker facilities in our I-1 district, and I think a few maybe in our C3 now. And so yes, within that specific building, no, we wouldn't be able to see any of these uses. But again, it could be next door. Because it would not be a residential zoning district.
And then in that same area with that getting developed, you know, we just annexed all that in. Is that not changing either?
Yes, that's something too that these we'll probably have to look at updating as we go. But yes.
And again, this was just at the time, the snapshot in time, and while we don't know if there are residential uses within some of those blue and red areas, that would preclude those individual lots. There might have been a few lots that have been annexed or proposed to be developed and have been approved and zoned that we maybe didn't have in the system when the analysis was done.
Yes, so we would be looking at all applications that come in and looking, honing in, if you will, on a specific area This is meant to be kind of just a general look at where these would be within the community as proposed.
But it should be noted that if I receive my permit for any one of those uses and the area within 1,000 feet becomes residentially zoned, I've got dibs.
Yes, correct.
So-
Correct. Yes. Yep, if there is an established cannabis use within there and residential moves in, doesn't mean that your cannabis use needs to go away.
So the dispensary is just for the retail sale of this to the medical cannabis patients, right? There's no consumption of cannabis on the premises.
Correct. It's all packaged, I understand.
So I guess the thing that I struggle with, and this is my personal opinion, I guess, is that the setbacks are significantly more restrictive than even the bar or tavern setbacks that we have, in which case we do have consumption of an inebriating chemical, right? Alcohol. So it seems like we're treating this significantly different when it's closer to a pharmacy in use.
Mr. Chair, I'll just,
and retail transactional sales.
this is Kays again,
Yes,
just
Mr.
to give we talked about that at the
Yep.
committee level, and I think the justification for the extra setbacks versus alcohol is because cannabis, even medical cannabis, is still a Class 1 drug
Yep.
and illegal at the federal level. And so I think that was primarily the reason for the extra space. Right,
Yeah, I guess
wrong,
the
right, wrong,
thing-
or
the thing
indifferent.
balancing
That was
it,
the reasoning.
Yes, and we do expect that some of these things may change with additional legislation at the state and federal level. But as we wrote this as proposed today,
And I guess the thing balancing what's written today, as we look at this map here, is that it doesn't overly burden the development of these areas because there's a significant amount of real estate that would still qualify, meeting these setbacks in areas that you would likely expect to see this kind of retail establishment, right?
from a staff perspective, that's what we'd hope to do as a committee is still balance and offer some protections to the community, but also have that balance and allow a number of properties and land to be used in for medical cannabis establishments.
Right.
I think one of the comments that came out directly in those discussions was that Watertown is a manufacturing community, and those types of, we don't care what kind of widget or joint that you're making. If you're manufacturing, and we're also an agricultural cultivation, whether it's corn or weed, it's all part of kind of who we are in this part of the world. And so that's why I think, there was discussions of some communities right now are not allowing cultivation, manufacturing, or testing facilities until they get a better handle of what, kind of support infrastructure they need to do those things. And the committee came back with a suggestion that, we are agriculture, we are manufacturing, that's who we are as a people in this part of the world. And so we didn't want to preclude that sort of development.
Yes,
Thank
and
you, Mr. Case.
we certainly do have, as a community, a relatively good street network and availability of industrial land, that type of thing, which would make it possible to look at the siting of these types of cannabis uses.
Is there any other discussions from the board on this topic? We will need a motion in order to take action.
Chair, I'll make the motion to approve resolution number 21-37, specifically striking subchapter 25.07.
$25.07, Stacy, which section is that?
Limitation on the
Yes.
number.
Be limitation on the number of medical cannabis dispensaries.
We have a motion by Mr. Colhane. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Case.
I have a second by Kays. Discussion on the proposed motion?
Are you gonna put a number on it?
No, I don't think we should. We don't regulate anything else like that. I think it's a bad practice overall in terms of that kinds of stuff. And I think if we could go back and redo our liquor licensing, we probably would do the same thing. Let the market decide. Why would we put a restriction on it? You end up in a situation where you accidentally or inadvertently create a monopoly. And we've had that here in Watertown before as it relates to liquor licenses. I mean, something that looks akin to that. And you end up with a bunch of stuff that we just don't really need or want. If they don't work out, if the market doesn't support it, they'll go bye-bye.
I agree with Mr.
Until
Culhane.
until it becomes recreational.
And I would be the same for recreational too. When that comes up next time, for the record, I don't think we should have a limitation on the number of rec ones. If there's 100 of them and 50 of them go broke, then so be it. We don't put limitations on doctors' offices. We don't put limitations on pharmacies. We don't put limitations on lawyers' offices. We don't put limitations on, you name it, on gardening, on lumber yards, on whatever it is.
But we do on our liquor.
And we shouldn't, frankly. But we don't have the power to change that.
Any additional comments before we take a vote on the motion on the table? All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Spire.
Yes.
We are voting on the amendment here. Hanson is.
Oh, no, the motion is to approve as amended.
Oh, approve as amended.
approve
Thank
as
you
amended.
for that correction. Approve as amended, which would strike the 25.07 just for the public, which would be striking the limit of 3 for the medical cannabis dispensaries. Okay, sorry about that.
So yes, approve as amended.
Thank you. Aletsky.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
You could pass, I think. Can you pass?
Okay, we can pass if we think that's permissible. Culhane.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson. No. Okay. Motion as amended passes.
Counted 5. Did we get a vote from everybody?
Jason's left meeting.
Yes,
Oh,
Jason has
okay.
left the meeting, and I apologize for that. Not letting you know, Chairman Dolly. So,
No, that's fine.
yes, we have a 5-1. A 5-1
So that
vote.
motion carries.
Yes.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
All right, with that, we'll move on to the next item on the regular agenda, which is 6C. It's commission consideration of resolution number 2021-42, adopting the boundaries of the tax increment district number 17, located along Golf Course Road between 4th Avenue Southwest and 3rd Avenue Southwest, just south of the Derby Downs development. Stacy, if you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a tax increment district number 17. As you mentioned, it's along Golf Course Road between 4th Avenue Southwest and 3rd Avenue Southwest near Derby Downs. This property would be referred to and described later on as Prairie Haven within Watertown. And William Riefenberger is the primary owner of the development, and he is in the audience this evening. So number 17, TIF number 17 is proposed for affordable housing. And the TIF would help with the cost of infrastructure and other necessary expenses needed to develop the area in preparation for single-family homes. The area of development is set to be completed in 3 phases, with the first phase hopefully starting this fall with property acquisition and some infrastructure development. The district is expected to result in $20 million in investment over a 3-year time frame, and there will be 72 homes with an estimated sale price of $260,000. And this does meet all of the statutory requirements. In addition, anything in the project cost that exceeds the total valuation set by 35% would require an amendment. So it'd be 20 years. The eligible TIF costs are $2.5 million, it looks like, and the estimated tax increment revenue is $5.6 million. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Quick question,
Thank you, Stacy.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Case.
A quick question. They say an estimated sale price of $260,000, but is there anything that would preclude them from building a $400,000 house in this development?
I don't think necessarily anything that the city has within this that might be in the development agreement, but I would probably refer that.
What's the top end, Steve, as far as housing per for a TIF? It's got to be some with it mirrors South Dakota Housing Development, which I think is 360, isn't it? It's
300,000 first-time home buyers.
And all 72 lots are going to be tied to that, whatever that floating standard is, for at least till the first ownership, correct?
Yeah, they're going to be R1C, that was created for this type of affordable housing.
Right.
The lots are just a touch smaller.
Mr. Chair, would we be able to open up for public comments, and then I could
Yes, I'll
invite
go ahead and open the
Mr.
public hearing.
Thorson
Thank you,
and or
Stacy.
Riefenberger up too, and as well as Tracy from WDC.
Yep, consider the public hearing open.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I got a quick
Talking
question.
about the plat right now. It's just
Okay,
that
but that's going to be in the next meeting. Okay.
we're not talking about the design. All we're talking about whether or not we want to allow the TIF.
You're moving out of the way.
The question was on where the larger, first off, the lots are 65 to 70 some feet, so it's going to be, on the other hand of that, as we, on this particular piece, not, but on the whole development over time, and if costs escalate, there could be, that's
Right.
probably, but in this aspect of this 70 some lots, no.
I just wanted it on record, Bill, that if the city provides a TIF, we're not putting TIFing for single-family residential development that's market-based, what we're seeing right now. Everybody's building $350,000 to $400,000 houses and getting a quasi-tax break. I mean, it's not a tax break, you're paying your taxes, but it's just going to pay those infrastructure. So I just want the public to know that we're not doing anything special for you, because you're still
Right.
having to, we're still saying 300,000 is the top end for the first-time homeowners. with the
Right,
state.
and honestly, I don't expect to be anywhere close to that, but.
And if I may, this was South Dakota, codified law 1119 that was put into regulation. I think the legislature put that in 2018, which allowed for this type of program, the affordable housing, to go into the TIF district.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I just wanted that for the public.
You
to
were
know.
probably involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw the lots, they looked like they were going to be R1C, but I didn't see anywhere within the TIF documentation regarding the zoning and the proposed R1C designation. Does it cover that in the TIF at all?
I don't think so. It's really not an applicable thing at this point.
Right, and what we'll be doing now on tomorrow is bringing the conceptual plan towards the Planning Commission, which is going to come in front of you guys at the next planning, which will then have some zoning issues and to finish that up.
Yeah, I think conceptually, what's before us as the Planning Commission is to make a recommendation to the City Council of whether or not we support the concept of using tax increment financing for residential housing at a certain price point, and which is allowed by statute.
It is. One of the things, if I may, which is interesting, in that TIF, when you have the city, the county, the schools, and the state also in that law allowed the schools to get state aid through the state, so they aren't getting gypped by any means. The schools will still be getting their share.
Okay, question. The TIF is only for this area in red, correct?
That's correct.
So then as the development grows, the lots will get bigger and they won't be on a TIF. It'll just be this area here.
I think what Bill is planning, and I hate to speak for him, you could sure say, but I think what we're doing right now is we're bringing in 35 acres into the city. That's what we're annexing. And then we're taking 20 acres, which we're going to use for the TIF, which has 72 houses. In the next phase, we're going to bring in enough for another 35 acres and bring another 72 homes in. The eventual plan is substantial number of homes.
The plan is for most of this whole area to be the same, and we'd be,
Yes.
come back again if everything works out for a TIF on the next one to do the same thing. And I tend to prove that this works and is going to be a real viable for this
But I
use.
thought that it would be like the smaller homes in front, and as you develop it, that's where you get into your more expensive, larger lots.
My purpose
That's
on
not what you want.
my purpose on this
Okay.
is basically, affordable. All this stuff is kind of vague terms, but for me, it's workforce housing is for the average working person, especially younger people, to get started in, to give them a leg up, and that's the purpose that I'm shooting for in this whole project.
Mr. Riefenberger, are you going to build these in a manner that would then allow first-time home buyers to make a purchase on a new home using the South Dakota first-time home buyers?
Right, yes.
Question for Stacy from a staff perspective. We created the R1C district specifically to try to encourage this kind of development. How many R1C lots have we zoned within the city of Watertown?
I only know of a couple, but yes, only know of a few. So this one definitely, with what's being shown, granted this is early on, this is the TIF at the conceptual phase, but these are generally the types of lots that the R1C would and could be proposed and work for.
And that's just speaking in terms of, trying to drive affordable housing within the city of Watertown. That was the intention of the creation of the R1C zone, and my recollection is the same as yours. I only recall a couple of these since we passed that ordinance, so it has not been eagerly adopted throughout the development community to date.
Yes, smaller lots predominantly and lesser setbacks for anybody wondering how the R1C would be different from our standard residential districts.
Which is kind of nice. You're looking at 9 feet on one side, 6 feet on the other side. These homes that they're just kind of early on. Bill's son, or grandson Carter has been putting this together, and Bill has requested that we have like about 1,000 feet per floor, and his initial plan is to have 2 bedrooms like this particular one, 2 bedrooms on top. You're going to have your kitchen, your living room, but the basement will be actually all framed in. The tub will be there for people so they can go in, finish this up. The garages will be on, air conditioning. It's just, there's been a lot of thought process into this. A lot of split levels, and then of course there's a 2-story house that he had planned, which is a little smaller, but overall the size is the same, but then of course there's the ranch style down here that he's only showing about 5 or 6 on here right now, but there will be numerous plans for people to look at, and he'll get them put up.
Without getting into too much minutia on this, the plan is to do half a dozen model homes, build these, get away from the construction loans, basically have the house done and sell them. So that's always, in order to get the costs competitive and appropriate, this is what you get. There's not going to be all kinds of choices, because if I have to get into individually doing all that, then all of a sudden the costs get too much money. And I do want to have double garages on all of them. There was some discussion early on about less or no garages, and I'm not into that at all. I just really don't want to see that happen. I want when we get done that my name is on this. I don't want this to be something that's.
I like the idea of 1,000 something square feet instead of the really smaller ones. There's a market for those too, but
We've done over the years, I mean, I've been in this lumber business in Watertown since 1969, and we did a lot of things that were through an FMHA program years back that were somewhere around 900 square foot on a split entry ones. But at that time, those financing was no garage, no air conditioning, all that stuff. So they had to put those on. And some of the ones that I had done behind Runnings area, we did one of those and we did a conventional ranch house between. And so in those cases, people kind of stuck up with the neighbors and put garages on. But I'm afraid if I did a lot of those in contiguously without any garages, that we would have a mess. People just have a lot of stuff. I don't care. I mean, that's just the way the world is. And if you don't have at least a two-stall garage, and I'm looking at like 24 by 24, not like even seeing a lot of plans where it's 22 by 22 and you barely can get out of the car because you need room for the cars and lawnmower and other things. So it's almost as important to have as much garage space as it is the rest. And if they finish off the lower level at some time, they got about 2,000 square feet. So this just gives people room to grow. And again, the whole idea is to give some place to get started and build some equity so young people can get a foot on the ground.
Bill always laughs at me because I built my house in 1977 and it looks just like one of these, and I'm still there. Never moved out. One of the other things that Bill has planned on doing on these houses so that we know that things are going to look right is the yards will be put in. There will be irrigation systems put in, so we know they're going to be looking very, very nice.
Is there any other questions for the applicant?
Just the one
From the
quick
board.
question, maybe for Tracy, the question we always ask. We still have plenty of headroom in our abilities to put TIFs.
Yes, we still fall below 1%.
What's the TIF, what part of the project is getting funded via the TIF?
The infrastructure.
We're talking the streets or the
Storm
sewer,
sewer.
everything? Okay, cool.
Is there any other comments from the public? Anybody in the room there? Looks a little empty behind you guys. All right, we'll close the public hearing.
Motion to approve. Case.
Second, Colleen.
Motion by Kays, second by Culhane. Any additional topic of discussion here, comment? All right, hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Culhane,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Aletsky,
yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
That resolution passes. We'll move on to 6D on the agenda, which is Commission Consideration Resolution 2021-40, amending the zoning map of the City of Watertown for a portion of blocks 8 and 9 of the plat of Valley View 3rd Edition from R1 to R2.
Okay. Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. I think you're good down. Yep. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Whenever you're ready, Chairman Dolly.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So what we're looking at here today is a request to rezone a portion of blocks 8 and 9 of a plat of Valley View 3rd Edition from R1 single family residential to R2 single family attached residential district. So with that, I believe that there aren't any lots that have been sold next door. So the lots proposed to be rezoned to R2 do not abut any lots that have already been sold as R1. This rezoning is appropriate for transitional zoning within a residential district. And we will also be looking at the lots being rezoned will also subsequently be replatted so the lot lines are accurate to the proposed rezone boundary. With that, let's pull up the map here. And it looks like the black hatched area are all platted lots. The yellow hatched area here is where we're looking at the rezoning that would be going again from the R1 to the R2 district. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does the density increase, potential density increase, do anything substantively to have an impact on sanitary sewer, drainage, or anything, traffic?
We do not believe so, no.
Stacy, what is the outlet, the hashtag, what is that going to be zoned? Is that R1 then again?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're looking
Stacy,
at
it's a little bit hard to see on the overlays there, but that street to the south, it doesn't end in a cul-de-sac, right? That's ultimately going to have a turn and an outlet back on 17th Avenue. So what is that? 16th Avenue goes to
Yes.
the west
Yes.
over to 6th Street. It's not a dead end, right?
No. Nope, I don't believe so.
Yeah, based on here, it shows that I pull in on 16th, I go all the way to the west to where the semi cul-de-sac is, and I can go north and come back around, right, Colin?
Yeah.
Yep. I'm guessing they're proposing to continue constructing the twin homes that they're doing up there in the development right now. Is that the general idea, Colin? He's shaking his head, yes.
I believe it is.
Right,
Mr.
I'll go ahead
Chair,
and open,
thank you.
I'll open the public hearing on this one. If anybody's here to speak on behalf or against.
Colin Paulson, on behalf of J&J Earthworks and J&J Land Sales. Yes, what Todd was saying was correct, by the way.
And Colin, what portion of the infrastructure is already in over there?
We are currently working on the underground infrastructure, so all of the pipes, and most of that's in currently already.
What's the time frame going to follow on that area to the north, the black hatched area, from a development standpoint?
That's going to be done very shortly as well. We're working on all the water currently, and then the rest of it will follow shortly here. We'll say this is happening way quicker than we ever envisioned it to happen, which is a good thing, but we're trying to keep lots on the market if we can.
Any additional questions for Colin from the board?
Just on the lots 33, 32, 31, 30, are those are R1s? Are those sold, that the people are aware that there'll be R2 across the street? Just, so the south side of 16th, sorry, Colin. So the south side that are remaining R1. Do you know if any of those are sold?
I don't believe those are sold at this time. I think these are the first ones that sold on this new block. And they just want to do twin homes on there.
And that's fine. It's just, I would hate for someone that bought an R1 to say, I mean, again, if they're there, then that's good. It's just, just throwing that in your ball court. If there's someone who has one.
They would have received a letter notice from across the street if they had purchased it, right? And we didn't hear anything from anybody else.
No.
Oh, you did notify, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep,
then
we did
cool.
notify within 250 feet.
Perfect.
To the lots of record. So no, we have not received any comment.
So when they buy, they'll know.
And is there anybody else to speak in the public hearing, either in the room or online in Teams?
I don't see anyone in the room, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
And no additional questions from the board for the applicant? All right, we'll close the public hearing.
Chair, I'll move to approve resolution number 2021-40.
Bonnie
Motion by
Oletzky,
Culhane.
I second that.
And a second by Oletzky. Any additional discussion before we take a vote on this? All right, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Spire,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Oletzky,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Moving on to item 6E on the agenda is Commission Consideration Resolution 2021-41, approving the plat of Valley View 4th Edition to the municipality of Watertown. Stacy?
Yes. This is actually the land area that we were just looking at. So this map should look very familiar. And here's the replat here. Showing. I don't know why all of these are not. There we go. So. Oh, here's 3rd and then here's 4th. So this is the one that we'd be looking at right here. So as you can see, there's a number of lots here for replatting. I believe that they're being enlarged to better accommodate for duplexes, as we previously heard from the owner's representative, and it reduces the number of lots by 1. The lots are going for the lots went from 117 feet in depth to 123 feet, allowing for an additional 6 foot in the depth. And the lots are all in conformance with the minimum district requirements of the R2 single family residential district, as that was just acted on and recommended approval to go to the R2. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'll move to approve resolution number 2021-41. Culhane.
Second
Motion
case.
by Culhane and a second by, was that Case?
Yes.
Any additional discussion before we take action on that? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.
All right. Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Oletzky,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
and Dolly.
Yes.
Okay.
Motion carried. Move on to item 7 on the agenda is open public comments. I don't believe we had anybody sign up, either online or in the room. So we'll move on to item 8, which is new business. Any new business?
I don't have any new business.
Any from the board? Moving on to item 9 is old business. Any from Stacy or the board members?
Just
Hearing
wanted
none.
to let.
Oh, yep, Stacy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let the board know that I'm following up with the engineering division on some of the comments about connectivity in certain areas of town. So hopefully we'll have some more information soon for you.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Item 10 on the agenda is executive session. Do we have any reason for executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2?
None that I know of.
All right, then I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll second
Do I have
that.
a motion? Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? We'll adjourn the Plan Commission and we'll reconvene shortly as